a little bit here. And, I'll also say that I definitely don't want this to be kind of like a lecture. I don't want you to feel like you're in a class right now. So I'll share a little bit about myself, but I'll also open it up and you can drop questions in the chat or drop comments in the chat. But I'm also curious to know from you, what made you choose to attend today's session? Like, what are you hoping to get out of it? What brought you here today? And if there are a couple brave souls who are willing to unmute their mics and like say out loud, I would love that. So I'll start by saying my name is Janu Mendel. I have lived in South Florida now for, I think, 14 years. I'm originally from Kingston, Jamaica, which is where I was born and grew up. Went to high school and college there before I made the move over to Miami. And, just been involved in a lot of things, right? I left Jamaica firm in the belief that one day I would be the Prime Minister of Jamaica, and then have roundabout way found my way to a profession which is not quite politics, but where I still get to make a really important impact every single day. And I'm really excited to be here to share a little bit about that with you, both from the standpoint of how we do things when the times are quote unquote normal, and how we've kind of had to pivot and do things a little bit differently in light of COVID-19 and just not really being able to be a physical presence in the community in the way that we normally are, which really is kind of one of the benchmarks of volunteering and service, and the difficulties that arise from it. So I'll pause there for a moment, and hopefully someone has kind of thought about something that they might want to say. And I see one or two things in the chat already, but curious to know what brings everyone here. I would love to hear.
Me first. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so personally, I would like to know more about how to do community service and do like social distancing, like to understand that community service doesn't stop because like there's a pandemic. There are other ways to help. So I would like to know under what circumstances or what can we do to help, to continue helping.
I was literally right before this pandemic started, I was looking at ways to volunteer. And then I was like, what? I kind of like just got left with nothing. So then I was just like, I feel so, not useless, but like, I feel like, I want to do something. And when I saw this, I'm like, perfect, finally.
Good. Maybe one more person. All right. If you feel so compelled, just drop something in the chat. I have it open so I can see the things coming through. All right. So a little bit of background, right, into the organization and how we get to do what we do every day. Our mission, right, Repair the World, mobilizes Jews and their communities to take action to pursue a just world, igniting a lifelong commitment to service. Now, as an organization, we believe that service in support of social change is vital to a flourishing Jewish community and an inspired Jewish life. And by 2030, Repair will inspire and catalyze 1 million acts of service towards repairing the world. Now, just quick background, right? We are like a Jewish organization, a Jewish nonprofit, and the name actually comes from a Hebrew expression, tikkun olam, which translates to repair the world. And there's this idea that in Judaism, it is our obligation to do our part towards repairing the world. There is a recognition that, we are only human and we're probably not expected to complete the task. Like, we're not going to fix all the world's problems by ourselves, but that does not mean that we are free to desist from doing our part. So it is from that place of really old values that we come to this work. And really want to do our part to repair the world. So Repair the World started in 2019, actually as a grant-making organization, and some of you might recognize the concept of how it plays out. So if you've ever heard of alternative breaks or have maybe participated in an alternative break, essentially it's a service trip where instead of spring break, instead of going to Cancun or something, you spend a week serving somewhere. So Repair would write grants to like Hillels on campus to have a group of students go to volunteer. But after a while, I think Repair came to the belief and understanding that it was probably a better use of dollars and would create much greater impact for us to serve in our local communities. And so we started to think about what it might look like if we had a model where we had people, instead of traveling somewhere far away to do some work that, you know, in many cases, you know, has its own difficulties, to serve locally in deep relationship with our communities. So we transitioned to a model where we run a year-long fellowship. So if you think about any year-long program like AmeriCorps or City Year or Teach for America, where someone like commits to a certain amount of time, we have fellows in about 9 cities now that we operate that commit to do 1 year of service with our community partners. Service is not something that you can just like jump up and do immediately, right? There is kind of this concept of the right way to do service and the right way to approach it. You know, sometimes it's easy to come up with an idea or to come from a good place, but to maybe approach it with this kind of saviorism complex, which is not necessarily the right way to approach service in many instances. And one of the things that really was appealing to me in launching Repair the World in Miami is that they gave me an entire year to build community and deep relationships and partnerships with people already doing the work, right? So it was very important for us not to be some kind of Jewish organization to like mobilize the young Jews who live in Miami to just fix the problems of Miami, because who the hell are we, right? Like, it's not our expertise or role to fix problems, right? People who are affected by problems are their best spokespeople. And so we are about amplifying the voices of those who have been suppressed and not speaking for them. So a lot of our work is in partnership with organizations, primarily in like Liberty City and Overtown. And the idea is that our fellows work directly with those community partners serving, and they spend part of their time mobilizing young people who live in Miami through education events to learn about issues of injustice, to hopefully then come and volunteer with them. So there's like a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into creating a good volunteer experience that comes from a good place and actually makes a lasting impact. And you know, we're really proud of the relationships we've built. We've been operating in Miami for 3 years now, to make it easy for folks like you all to, you know, plug into opportunities that we have already spent a lot of time building relationships with, and are able to come from a place of deep understanding and relationship with community. So I mentioned our fellowship, and these are the 5 fellows who served in Miami this past year, right? So our fellowship runs from July to August. So these folks just, you know, quote unquote, graduated the fellowship. And if you look at the slide, you'll get kind of a preview of some of the organizations in Miami that we work with. And you might recognize some of them, right? So the Lotus House is a very famous women's shelter nationally. We work with Branches, Health in the Hood, which is an urban garden, Miami Children's Initiative, which runs a project in Liberty City, Guitars Over Guns, Miami Rescue Mission. And, you know, the fellows spend 15 hours a week at least between these partners, just doing direct volunteering and service with them. And because they're kind of on the inside of these institutions, when we bring volunteers from outside the community, there is, you know, a trust that has been built over a long period of time that allows us to do that with the most amount of impact. Some examples of things that we've done recently. Right when the fellows first started, you might remember Hurricane Dorian, you know, swept through the Caribbean. So there were a lot of relief efforts that were mobilized in Miami to help support or you know, friends in the Caribbean, because there are so many people here who are connected to a lot of those islands, Bahamas specifically. One of the pictures here is us serving at Camilla's House, which is a shelter in Miami that we have a very close relationship with for people who are experiencing homelessness. And there's a photo here that I included on purpose where we were learning, right? So we talked about our values-based approach. And I think it's so important to really understand the context of why problems exist before you just try to jump in and volunteer. And so we have an educational component in almost everything we do, right? Through events as kind of the entryway for someone to first learn about, an injustice in Miami, to then say, okay, now that I know more about it, I'm going to come with you to this place to volunteer. So it's not just about, showing up to serve in a soup kitchen. We want people to actually understand and interrogate ideas about why a soup kitchen even needs to exist in the first place. This is a more extensive partner list of people that we work with. A lot is similar to where the partners themselves are assigned, but we also have kind of like one-off partnerships that we do throughout the year as well. So, I'm curious to know if anyone has heard of any of these organizations or has maybe even volunteered with one in the past. I see a yes coming through. Great. So what I wanted to do is kind of talk a little bit about how volunteering fits into the big picture. So we talk often about these different modes of social change that exist in the world. And many people have come up to me, one-on-one at a volunteer project or elsewhere, and they say, listen, why is it that we're out here volunteering when we should be, on the steps of the Capitol in Tallahassee trying to change the laws? Like, we're doing this thing, but we're not fixing the root cause. And you know what, that's a really valid question. And, my response is usually in the form of this story, right? So I'll share a quick story with you. So imagine for a moment, you are living in a town and you're in the valley, and from the top of the hill, there's trash that's coming down the river every single day into the river, right? Polluting the water that you drink and that you need to use to sustain your own life. Solving the problem would definitely entail marching up to the top of the hill and figuring out where the trash is coming from. Valid. But in the moment now, where the drinking water is contaminated, we still need to be able to remove the trash as it's coming down, right? So it's not a hierarchy that one way is better than the other, but about how they all fit as part of a big picture. So you can create social change through philanthropy, right? Giving money and resources, through service, which is what we say to refer to volunteering. That's what repair does and how we fit into the picture. Organizing, right? Mobilizing people, which is an important skill that not everybody has. And if you are an organizer, more power to you. It is not an easy thing to do. Advocacy, which is the storming the Capitol and changing the laws piece, crucial and important. And education. And I'm really happy that I saw a few people in the chat, highlighting the education piece, because, some people will wonder, okay, why are we sitting around talking about this issue instead of doing something about it? Well, guess what? Like we need to learn about it. We need to know the background. There are people at the table who don't know as much as you might. We need to all have shared language, shared understanding, shared background. So then we can go to the next step, right? For some, the next step is volunteering. For some, the next step is the organizing. For some, the next step is using their wallet or their social cachet. And, on and on it goes. So no hierarchy here. They all play into each other. So we've done all of these things for the last 3 years. We've been very proud about our presence in the community, or relationships with folks, and being able to volunteer in true partnership without the Saviorism piece. Then COVID hit, right? And I'm sure in one way or another, everyone on this call has had some kind of personal effect that has occurred as a result of COVID-19. It has not been an easy thing for our community to deal with. And we as an organization had to pivot immediately, right? And that was really hard for us. It's like, we are an organization whose whole being has to do with mobilizing groups of people to be together to either learn or to serve. And then all of a sudden, we were not able to do that at all when this all started. So immediately we had to pivot and move all of our programming virtual, right? So Zoom became our place where we could continue our education and our community building and bringing people together to learn about issues. We also had to think about how we were supporting our partners that the fellows were working with virtually, right? So our fellows would be meeting with their partner supervisors virtually. Um, the immediate need, right? And it's very interesting to think about how when disaster strikes, everyone wants to volunteer, right? They want to know how they can get involved. Maybe they were kind of thinking about it before, maybe they won't think about it after. In the immediate aftermath, everyone wants to jump in, and that's great. And we usually see it in South Florida mostly when it comes to hurricanes, right? As soon as a hurricane hits, everyone wants to jump in. But the problem is that volunteers aren't necessarily what is needed in that moment, and the real work and the building that comes back where volunteers are needed lasts for years. There are still groups of volunteers traveling to Houston today to help rebuild after the hurricane that hit Houston. But people don't even realize it doesn't make news anymore because the event has long since passed. What we recognized with our partners because of the relationships that we have is that their first hit was financial, right? Those who were providing essential services needed funds to be able to continue their operation. So we had to get creative. And this is something that I encourage you all to think about when it comes to how you serve, right? And thinking back to those modes of social change and how you can make an impact. So Repair launched a campaign called Spring into Solidarity, where we had our volunteer base donate goods, donate money, donate funds, which we funneled into our partner organizations. So in the immediate aftermath, they could still operate, that they could still provide services to the community. We were raising our awareness about their efforts and what they were doing, and kind of helping in that way. Our fellows were able to do some remote volunteering, which I'm sure is like one of the reasons most people are on this call here today, right? Like, what is remote volunteering? What does remote volunteering even look like? And I can give you a few examples of how our fellows kind of leaned into that concept. We volunteer with an organization called Branches, which does after-school programming for kids in marginalized communities. And once the kids could no longer be in school and they were at home, with families who either lost their jobs or weren't able to have easy access to food and other resources, we had like lists of people who were part of the program where our volunteers were able to make wellness calls, right? So without having to show up to the after school program, we were calling these families and just finding out, are you good? Are you okay? What are your needs right now? What can we help with? And then once we kind of figured out what was happening, okay, someone doesn't have like a Chromebook to be able to log on to their online classes. How can we like move some things around so we can get this person a Chromebook? This person, their mom lost their job. How can we make sure that they can eat next week? And then we connected them to one of our other partners, Health in the Hood. And this is a real story, like Health in the Hood, who does urban gardening and food distribution, got a donation from Publix of a ton of gift cards for food. So our fellow who works for both of those organizations was able to take the gift cards from Health in the Hood and distribute them to the families from Branches through these wellness checks that were happening virtually. So the remote volunteering was key. They were also doing social and emotional wellness Zoom sessions for the kids, which is what this fellow was doing in person as well. So I'll pause there for a moment because I know I've been talking a lot, and I'm wondering if anyone at this point of the conversation has any questions or any comments or wants to engage in any sort of way. All right, you will let me know. So let's talk a little bit about ways that you could potentially plug in during this time, right? So you're sitting on this call wondering, okay, now what? I've heard some good stories, I've heard some good examples. What's next for me? So I can tell you, right, there's a lot happening right now, not just related to COVID-19, but in the fight in America right now towards greater racial equity. Repair has hosted virtual activism events. So this is something that you could either host for your friends or like participate in when you see. So virtually, we actually had people come together and do action items to help make change, right? And that is an act of service. That is volunteering in a way. So during a time where we're still unable to show up in person to go do certain things that we might normally do during quote unquote regular times, there are still ways that you can be safe and have a duty to your community by staying at home, but also make some effective change. So twice in the last month, we had groups of 30 people at a time on a call, and we went through lists of petitions that were applicable in the moment right now. Petitions related to things like Breonna Taylor, related to George Floyd, arresting the people who killed George Floyd. Locally speaking, we had, petition signing to oppose the new jail in Miami. And of course, like, I recognize that people on this call might have differing, political views. You do what's comfortable for you. But the point of this is to say that you can take action, and there are still issues in which you can still participate, right? Miami-Dade County is still hosting now their meetings online, where you can sign up ahead of time and reserve a slot to speak on behalf of an issue. So, you can look up on the Miami-Dade County websites and, look for whatever upcoming meetings are, so you can engage and also take action. Related to virtual volunteering even more, Repair launched a website through a medium called Catch a Fire, which pairs you up with organizations. So it's almost like a job matching service in a way, where you go on and you list kind of things that you're good at that you might be able to help someone with, and that organizations sign up and they say, we need help right now for someone to help us do XYZ. And then you get paired up with somebody. And then if it's a match, then you set up a certain amount of time and you get the hours, and you're able to help that person remotely. And I'll take a moment to drop that link in the chat, so you can click on it. And I'll also arrange probably with my FIU friends to see if we can send out something after to everyone who registered, so you'll have a list of resources and things. But I highly recommend looking that up. And if you have the time and the space and the ability to volunteer with an organization who is in need of help right now, you can find something on there. There are opportunities in Miami right now for virtual tutoring, right? So many kids are getting left behind because of the lack of access to technology. We do not have anywhere near 100% attendance for the distance learning that has taken place for the last school semester, and a lot of it is really rooted in the inequities that exist from certain community to community. So there's tutoring opportunities and ways that you can help mentor someone remotely, tutor someone remotely. That is still very much a big need. Education justice is one of the pieces that Repair focuses on a lot. Like, education justice and food justice are our main two issue areas. So, I feel personally passionate about helping to right the inequities that exist in the education system. I mentioned earlier wellness checks. So, within the Jewish community, for example, we have a lot of elderly Holocaust survivors who are, living based on access to the food bank, to the kosher food bank, and they're not getting their, regular food or access to food. They can't leave their homes right now. So there's lists of people where if you sign up through the right organization, you can get a list of people to call, like checking in on senior citizens who are still very marginalized in Miami right now because of COVID, making sure they're okay, and then figuring out how we can get them what they need. Same goes for the example I mentioned earlier with families who are living in marginalized neighborhoods. And then voter registration efforts, for example, like switching to civic engagement for a second. There's a lot that you can be doing online. You can be using your organizing power, the power of your social media. I think, representational politics is just as important a part of everything else that we do out in the community. So, I mean, shout out to everyone on this call who is already registered to vote. If you're not, get it done. Get your friends to do it. Don't miss out. Now, I will also say that even in light of COVID, there are a few in-person volunteer opportunities that still exist. And if you feel safe and able, I do recommend plugging in. So one of the pieces that is happening right now is that there's still a huge need for food distribution because people are finding it difficult to access. So United Way, for example, who we work with a lot, has opportunities on their website. So if you go to volunteermiami.org, you can also kind of see a bunch of local opportunities where you either are in a relatively safe space when it comes to COVID, right? So maybe you get assigned a certain area by yourself with like a bunch of things to start packing groceries and boxes of food to then later get distributed. You can participate in the actual food distribution. So if you've seen on the news, on the television, of the cars that line up to come get a box of food, Repair has participated in a few of those with our partners where, you know, we go to the distribution site in Opalaka, and, you know, a couple times a week we're distributing that food and everyone is wearing masks. You know, we really make our best effort to limit the amount of people who are there, to make sure PPE is accessible and available. So it's like volunteering in a lot of ways is an essential service right now. Like volunteers are essential workers, and we still need to do it, to continue to serve our community, but to do it safely. And if you're unable to do it, there shouldn't be any guilt that's associated with that. That's the reason I kind of highlighted the modes of social change and the different ways that you can get involved and make a difference. It doesn't have to be that you need to show up in person to volunteer, right? If you think that volunteering virtually is not as impactful, I promise you that, you know, you are wrong there. Like, virtual volunteering right now, more than anything, is impactful for a few different ways. We really need to stay connected to our community. Virtual is the way that it's happening right now. So there are also, on the education piece, lots of events happening on Zoom that you can attend, learn about issues, see what's happening, and like I mentioned earlier, use your social media to good effect to organize, spread information, spread opportunities, gather people, and so forth. So I know some questions have been coming in the chat, so I'll pause, and if anyone wants to help me tackle some of these questions. Or
Carmen, do you see the questions?
So we do have a question from Camila Vasquez. She said, in regards to social media, where can we find up-to-date credible sources for virtual service opportunities / educational opportunities to post and maybe spread the word?
Great. So I will say United Way is a really good resource in our community for curating a lot of the volunteering that goes on. So if you go to volunteermiami.org, which is kind of the web page for United Way Miami-Dade, they have a lot of the most up-to-date volunteer opportunities. I would also say Repair the World Miami, but we're at the end of our fellowship program year right now, so there's not so much that we have posted until our next group of fellows start. But come August, check werepair.org/Miami for sure, because we post a bunch of things both for volunteer and for educational opportunities as well. I think there are some great organizations like New Florida Majority, who, if you follow their Instagram, they post a lot. And New Florida Majority is just also connected to a lot of the organizing folks in Miami who are posting information, whether it be for rallies or for volunteer needs or for programs that are happening, discussions that are happening. So if you follow them, you'll get some good things and also learn other organizations to follow, like, from that point forward. All right. So, and feel free to unmute at this point if you have any questions. If there's something that I said that was, you know, that piqued your interest about a particular thing, or you want to hear a little bit more about it, or you want me to go a little more in depth. You know, I could talk about volunteering and our work for probably 5 hours at a time. So I have to, like, very purposefully pick the pieces that, you know, made sense for this particular discussion. So please feel free to, this is your time now.
I'm interested in the education aspect of, like, I remember I was in FIU Teach, and there was this opportunity to tutor students that failed their either math or science classes. And I remember I applied for that, but I guess something in that realm of educating kids in high school or middle school, elementary, like, you know, or just,
So is a question about what further opportunities exist to plug into that a little bit more?
yeah, I guess, like, in volunteering education wise, because I feel like that's That's something that's very prominent in virtually.
Right, got it. So, right, United Way right now at this moment has opportunities for virtual tutoring, which you can definitely plug into. During the year, there's another organization I'm familiar with called Junior Achievement. And they are always looking for people to come into the schools when it's possible, of course, to run workshops with the kids and do, you know, some in person, but also some remote tutoring opportunities. So I'd say those are two very good resources to start. And then during our program year at Repair, we work with a lot of after school programs, but the reason why you probably find a little bit of difficulty doing, you know, tutoring or working directly with the school system is because there's a lot of red tape, right? So you have to have like background checks and like a lot of things that need to happen before you can actually be like on a school campus or that sort of thing. But episodically volunteering through an organization like Repair the World, for example, like our fellows at the start of the year go through all of that red tape on the behalf of people we bring with us. So our fellows, for example, are working in classrooms after school at places like Miami Children's Initiative, right? So they have a program at Charles R. Drew K-12 in Liberty City. We work with a program called Achieve Miami. We work with a program called Guitars Over Guns. So if a volunteer is interested in coming with our fellow to volunteer, then that is definitely a possibility that exists as well. What groups and organizations are underrepresented in greater need for volunteers because of the pandemic? I mean, listen, I think right now, the same thing that holds true in most disasters, unfortunately, are holding true now as well. So, or communities that are, you know, or Black and Brown communities in Miami are typically underrepresented anyway, and are always harder hit when disaster strikes, so to speak. So in the immediate aftermath, we saw a lot of our population of folks experiencing homelessness. So Lotus House, Camilla's House, Miami Rescue Mission, and a lot of those shelters that we work with were like having a lot of intake and needing a lot of people to be able to continue providing services to folks who are, you know, literally in many cases one paycheck away from being in a position where they're going to experience homelessness. From a school perspective, we found that, you know, our kids in Liberty City, Overtown, and similar areas just did not have the same technology access to education. And because of home situations or otherwise, were not able to even log on to classes even if they wanted to in many needs. So that's why I think this opportunity for virtual tutoring, right? So being able to volunteer to do either some combination of tutoring some kids directly or participating in phone calls to do wellness checks and helping to make some connections to resources for folks are you know, an important aspect of who needs the help right now.
Jono, I think what I've been seeing a lot in the chat is that folks are very interested in that educational piece that is needed with volunteering. I dropped a gem in the chat that you said, you know, when we think about going to volunteer for soup kitchens, right, we need to interrogate why they exist in the first place. And I try to teach that to my students in alternative breaks as well. So could you tell us a little bit about what educational pieces you think, you know, students or anyone who's volunteering might need before we go into these communities to try and help, right? I think also tying in that white saviorism piece that you mentioned earlier, people seem to be interested in learning more about that and what does that mean, right? Because I think we don't want to be problematic in trying to help.
Totally, I appreciate that question so greatly because, you know, it's something that we make such great effort to mitigate when we volunteer. So the idea behind white saviorism is that, you know, we, the people who have, know best, and we are here to save the people who don't have. But the reality in America is that those who don't have just because they aren't able to. It's usually because they weren't allowed to have. Marginalized voices are often suppressed. And so I mentioned this earlier that it's important to amplify those voices so they can speak for themselves as opposed to speaking on their behalf. And an easy example, right, that I always bring up is, imagine a few people who say, you know what, people are hungry. We're going to make 1,000 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Let's get 10 of our friends and make these sandwiches. And you spend 3 hours making these sandwiches, and then you go and you drop them off at a shelter. Now, you didn't stop for once to ask yourself, does anyone need these sandwiches? Do people even like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches? Like, you didn't ask yourself anything. You just decided you knew what was best. What's going to happen is that you're going to drop them off at the shelter. You're going to drive home and feel really good. Your shelter is going to say, well, we don't know who prepared these. We don't know where these came from. We didn't even want these. You know where they're going to go? Probably in the trash. And that's like, an example of how white saviorism kind of plays into this kind of thing where you go to volunteer and you think you're doing this great thing because you think it, right? Because you don't understand the perspective of the actual needs. You haven't had a conversation with anybody about it, right? If you ask the people who are in the shelter, what do you need? Then the answer you're going to get is probably not peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And it's first to ask, what do you need? And how can I be a partner to you in achieving this? So you can like stand up, like not for me to lift you up, but for you to stand up. How can I help remove some of these barriers, right? So you can do it. And that's like kind of where we come from. And because of the lack of understanding in many cases of issues around systemic racism or why certain communities are marginalized or oppressed, volunteers, like you have like volunteers who have been volunteering for 20 years and have no idea about systemic racism, right? They have no idea like what is going on in the communities. And it's nice that you feel good and you want to volunteer, but like we just don't believe that that's the way to do it. So whenever we bring a group anywhere, we spend a minute talking about those things, right? So if we go to an urban garden, we actually spend time with the volunteers talking about, what does food justice mean? What is a food desert? Why does a food desert exist, right? We know we are here to like meet an immediate need, but this shouldn't exist. And here are ways that we could potentially plug in to solve the issue after we volunteer today. The work doesn't end just because you volunteered once. We need to come back again and again. We need to continue to stand in solidarity. We need to continue to take action. After the volunteering is done, we have our reflection. We say, okay, well, what did you learn today? What did you see? What did you observe? How did you feel? Because without that context and without that like deconstruction of what was happening, then the service is almost meaningless. So that's why we really believe that the education piece is key. And from an engagement standpoint, right, we know that not everyone rolls out of bed every day just ready to jump into a community to serve. Like that's a hard thing for some people. But you know what? You do what you're passionate about. So sometimes we'll host an event like a happy hour, right? We run a happy hour series called Cocktails with a Conscience. So people are more willing first to come and hang out with some friends and have a drink than to go to volunteer in Liberty City, right? And that's fine. But when they come and we teach them about something and we teach them about an issue that is happening right in our own backyard, then hopefully that person goes home and says, wow, I did not know, and that is messed up. And you know what? Now I'm maybe a little bit more passionate about something that I've understood it and I've learned something new. And when I get an email from Repair the World next week to say that they're bringing a group to go do something, I'm going to go with them because I get it now.
Love that answer. Thank you.
I have a question. Another one. If I
Go
may
for
ask.
it.
Just so we can be able to share those educational outlets, do you know of any like keynote speakers that we can like share their information on, just for example, to use systemic racism as an example, or intersectionality, just in a sense, that have talked about it, so we can be able to share, like, if you want to learn more, watch this video.
Got it. Okay, I mean, I'll commit to compiling a few things to send out in the post notes. But there are a few local people who I definitely recommend following on social media. One of my like personal local heroes is a woman named Valencia Gonda. So I'll type her name in the chat so you know how to spell it. So Valencia is a real deal organizer, right? So she's one of the people who has pioneered this idea of climate gentrification, right? So she didn't necessarily coin the term immediately, but a lot of people are talking about climate gentrification because of workshops she's held. She's, you know, born and raised in Miami, organizes forever. And this idea of, I mean, if you, and you know what gentrification is, right? People are worried that the next phase of gentrification is the high land areas, now like Liberty City and places more inland because of sea level rise, and that folks who live in those communities are almost like already being pushed out and developers are already buying things up. There's another one who does a lot of really amazing local work around youth violence in our community, and she also works with Miami-Dade County. So through her, you'll see like a lot of other notable people to follow. Dr. Shirley Plantin. So I just dropped her name in the chat as well, and I'll compile a few other things that I'll send out after as well. I appreciate that question.
Thank you.
And just to provide more resources through FIU, Babyface is going to share that in her area.
Hey y'all, so Babyface here. For those of you who do not know me, I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm currently the advisor for our Alternative Breaks program in the Center for Leadership and Service. And so one of the opportunities that we have for you all to find volunteering opportunities is our website called GivePulse. So I'll type that in the chat as well. www.givepulse.com. Once you kind of sign up and log in, you're gonna go through the single sign-on option. My bad, y'all. Older computer keyboard is sticking. And so once you go through that option, you're gonna find Florida International University and sign in through there, or create your profile as well if you have not signed in before. Once you do that, you'll have access to our personal FIU portal, and it'll show you all of the community partners that we currently have affiliated with FIU. There is where you'll find opportunities that they post for volunteering. They also post kind of events that they have going on that you can attend. And then they currently have a lot of virtual volunteering opportunities, or they're posting things that maybe that community partner needs at the time, kind of what Johnny was talking about earlier, of, you know, not assuming what a community needs at this time, but looking to see what people are asking for. I do know that Lotus House, Camilla's house, you know, people are asking for socks is a thing right now, as well as, you know, gently used clothing, which I think is also always in need, but right now there's a high need for that. And so if you are looking for opportunities more locally and specifically in Miami, that would be the best place to start. Thanks, Ivy.
And we'll just take a couple more minutes if there's any more questions. No, I think we're good. I'll be sending out the survey soon, and I'll include all these links, helpful links as well. So thank you to everybody for joining us, and hope to see you again when we plan some more life skills series. We'll send them out to you. Thank you, John Yu, as well, for your time, and everyone else.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm.